Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Board Games with Scott show. In tonight's performance, the role of board game masons will be played by the German understudy Mauerbauer. There is no smoking, drinking, eating, or laughing in the Board Games with Scott Theater. Flash photography is not allowed, and the use of recording devices is prohibited. Please silence all cell phones and pagers at this time. Thank you. Hi there, and welcome to Board Games with Scott. This is a show where I take a board game, I explain it, I briefly review it to help you understand if it's something you might want to purchase. Today I'm going to be talking about Mauerbauer. This is a German game published by Hans und Glück. It's a game by Leo Colvini, who's done other games like Carolus Magnus, other abstract games. And at its heart, despite all of the appearance of it being a concrete game, it's quite an abstract game. It's a game about building walls, building towers, and attempting to score points based upon a number of different scoring opportunities. You're going to have a hand of cards, and in this hand of cards you're going to have conflicting scoring opportunities. And you have to decide when is the best time to use each card to get the most points that you can. This game has some luck, but it's got a good combination of strategy and luck. It's for ages 8 and up. 2 to 4 players, takes about 45 minutes to an hour, depending upon how long you ponder your moves. So why don't we open up this box and see what's inside. What are the components of Mauerbauer? Well, first you get a fairly large board. This half of the board you use for playing the game, and this half is an up and down scoring track. We found because of the up and down nature that we would occasionally move people the wrong way on the board when you're trying to score them. But once you spend a moment to think about it, you can work it out. You get a number of nice sized wooden towers in 3 different colors. You get some nice walls. They're, again, nice wooden pieces. You get a number of small and large buildings in all of the different colors that are used in the game. You get 3 wooden dice, which indicate to you what you're going to be building, and cards. These are the cards you're going to be clinging to during the game. These cards will show you what your goals are during the game, and you'll play these cards every time someone finishes up a city. Probably my only complaint with the components of these cards, they're quite small, kind of like the small Ticket to Ride cards. They're flexible, and the problem is people hang on to these cards during the game, and so the cards very quickly show wear. So that's probably the only complaint I have with the components. Other than that, all of the wooden pieces are very nice. It's a very nice, chunky game. It's a pretty game to play. And so I enjoy the aesthetics of this game. So why don't we look at how all these components work together in the flow of play. Here's the way the game goes. On your turn, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take one of these walls and you're going to place it somewhere on the board, connecting 2 spaces. Then you're going to roll these dice, and these dice are going to indicate a few things. One of the dice will show you whether you're going to have to play a black, a white, or a gray tower on one end of the wall. So whatever you roll here, you have to put that on one of the ends. The other end, you can choose whatever color you'd like to put, and you'll make that choice based upon these scoring cards that you have that I'll talk about later. The color of the tower that you pick has no impact on gameplay other than helping you to score certain cards. The next thing you'll do is you'll look at the other dice, and those are going to tell you what colors of small houses you're going to play on either side of the wall. For example, if I were to roll a red and a green, then I'd have to place 1 red and 1 green house on either side of the wall I just placed. I can choose which side they go on, but I have to put a red and a green. There's also a question mark available. If you roll the question mark, then you pick the color that you put on that side of the wall. And the final thing you do is if you have completed a city, meaning that you've got something completely surrounded, then you have a scoring round. That triggers a scoring round. If you do not complete a city with your play, then the next player takes their turn, puts a piece out, rolls the dice, places the one required tower, places a tower of the color of their choosing, and then places the appropriate small blocks on either side of the wall. And that's the way play goes. On your turn, you roll, you place, you see if you completed a city. If you did, then you have a scoring round, and play continues. And the game's going to go on until one of a few things happen. Until either the last tower is placed, or the last wall is placed, or you run out of these big tokens, which I'll talk about in a little bit. When one of those three things happens, then that's going to trigger the end of the game, and you'll see who ends up, you'll have a final scoring, and you'll see who ends up with the most points. Now, when a city is completed, a few things happen. The first thing that happens is, within a city, when it's completed, any pair of the small guys turn into a big one. So every time you have, when a city is completed, every two of these are taken off the board and replaced with a big one. And that's going to matter on some of these scoring cards. That's also one of the ending conditions of the game. If you run out of these big houses, then the game ends. The other thing that happens is when you complete an area, you have a choice. One thing that you may do is you may remove one wall of that city that will end up making it a bigger city. And so as the game goes on, what you're going to have are larger and larger cities being completed. So again, if I were to play here, I could choose to remove this, making this a bigger area. Or I could choose to leave it the way it is if I wanted a smaller area. And again, those choices are going to be dictated by the scoring cards. So it's the choice of the player who's finishing it, whether or not they're going to make this a bigger city or they're going to leave it as two smaller cities. Now, when you're removing walls, you can't remove a wall that would cause an existing city to be reopened. So, for example, if this were the situation, let's say I played there and I played there, I couldn't remove this wall, for example, because that's going to reopen this city. In fact, if I played these, I couldn't remove any of these walls. But if I were to play on this side instead, then I could remove this, making it a bigger city. And so you're going to get bigger and bigger cities as the game goes on. Now, the game is all about your scoring opportunities, and so I'm going to talk about those at this point. Remember, during a scoring round, each player gets a chance to play one or two cards and score points for those cards. The player will then get to draw a card from the deck. If the player chooses to not score any cards, they must discard a card, but then they get to draw two cards from the deck. These cards are going to represent the different scoring opportunities that you have in the game. So what's important is that the cards come in two different types. There are cards that have a green background, and the green background indicates things that are not within a city. And there are cards that have a white background, and these cards represent things that are within the scored city. So the cards with the little triangle at the top are going to apply only to the city that is currently being scored. The cards with the large green background are going to apply to the whole board, but they don't include anything that's already part of a completed city. You've got this one which has a green background and shows some water, and it's going to apply to things on the water. And then the symbols on the card tell you what you're going to score for. For example, in this one, this tells you that for every single yellow that is somewhere outside of a city, you get 1 point. So if a city is scored, you can choose to play a card and score some points. And that's the way this works. When a city is scored, each player has the ability to play one or two of these cards and score points, and then they're going to get one replacement card. So one of the balances you have to make in the game is you have to decide, do I think that there's 5 yellows now outside of cities? Do I think that when my turn comes around, I can get more yellows out there to get more points for this card? Or do I think that 5 is going to be the most it's going to be, and people are going to start enclosing those yellows, making this card worth fewer points? That's the big decision of the game. Do you claim something now or do you wait for later? So that one means for every yellow guy outside of a city, you get a point. For every wall that is outside of a city, you get a point. For every gray tower that is outside of the city, you get 2 points. For every completed city, you get a point. So in this one, you look at the whole board and you look for all the completed cities, and those give you a point. Now, one thing to note on the board is there are some symbols here on the sides. There are 3 fiefdoms in the land. And the fiefdom borders are marked by these lighter areas, these sort of gold lines. That tells you the border of the fiefdom. And some of your cards, like this one, says for every small house that is in the fiefdom, in this case it is this fiefdom over here, that is not within a city, you get a point. So this one, you have to look in that area of the board and count how many houses there are that are not currently enclosed in city walls, and you get a point for that. So those are the different types of cards that you can score for things outside of a city. Now let's talk about the city itself. Then there are some cards that let you score things that happen within a city. Now, one thing that I need to make sure to make clear is that there are these big huts that happen when you have 2 small huts in an enclosed city. And again, you check for that whenever you put that last wall down, then you take a look at every pair of the small huts. You pull those out and replace them with one big hut. And so some of the cards have to do with small huts and big huts. One of the complaints about the games is the fact that it's kind of hard to tell on some of these. It's a difference in size, a slight difference in shape. But you have to make sure and look carefully to understand what you're looking at. For example, this card has no reference, but most of the cards that have no other reference with small and big are referring to small things. If the cards are involving big things, it usually makes that fairly clear, usually. This one, for example, says that for every yellow that you have within the closed city, the city just completed, you get 1 for a small house, and you get 3 for every big house. This one says for every white tower that is part of the city you've just completed, you get 2 points. This one is if you play a single triangle city, if you finish up a single triangle city, that's worth 6 points. This one's a bit bigger. This one shows the number 7 plus here, which means if you complete a city that's at least 7 squares, then you get 9 points. Or you don't have to complete it. If the city just completed is 7 squares or larger, you can play this card and get 9 points. This one's a little more challenging. This one shows that if you have 2 or 3 different colors of houses, you're going to get 4 points. If you have 4 or 5 different colors of houses, you're going to get 7 points. So that's the way that this card works. This card, for example, now let's see if you can figure out what this card means. It's green, so it means it's everything not in a city, it's every tower, and it's every tower on a water space. So every tower on a water space not part of a completed city gets you 2 points. So again, to remind you, the way it works is when the city is completed, every player has a chance to play 1 or 2 of these scoring cards and score points. And then every player can then draw 1 card in replacement. You have a few other options. If your cards are horrible, you can choose to not score anything, discard a card, and draw 2 cards, 2 new cards into your hand. That's going to be one way of getting more cards into your hand than you started the game with. The final thing I should talk about is the player who is in last place has an additional opportunity after scoring has gone on. The player in last place may choose to discard as many cards from their hand as they'd like and draw replacements. So it's a nice little catch-up mechanism, and you can manipulate that and try to stay just behind last place, so you have the advantage of getting rid of cards that are not going to score many points. So you continue going until you run out of walls, or run out of towers, or run out of palaces, at which point that triggers the endgame scoring. The way that works is you finish out the turn, and one of 2 things happened. Either a city was completed in the final turn, in which case you score that city as normal. Everyone plays 1 or 2 cards that apply to the city. Or, if no city was completed, then everyone gets to pick a city, 1 city, and play 1 or 2 cards as though they are scoring that city. That can make a pretty big swing on the final scores, so it's something to think about as you get to the end game. And that is Mauerbauer. Well, that's Mauerbauer. So, what do I think about this game? I enjoy games that have a balance between strategy and luck. So you could just make a choice and roll the dice and see what you get. The cards provide an interesting choice. There's a lot of tension in this game because you're secretly hoping another player will close the city or won't close the city or take away that wall or not take away that wall. And depending upon what they do, then you make the best you can with the cards in your hand. The mechanism to help the last player catch up is a clever one, and one that can actually be manipulated, that you can watch to make sure if you can be the last player by just a few points, you can get a lot of power cycle through your cards to find cards that are going to score well. And you can do that because you don't have to score when a city is completed. You can just discard some cards, take some new ones, and wait. And those cards are powerful. Each card is scoring between 4 and 7 points, and the more of those you can get a hold of, the better. So the game's got a really clever balance between collecting more cards and scoring them and deciding when to score them and looking at future opportunities. And so I found it a very engaging game. I found it interesting to play. I'm going to give this game an A-. It's a nice balance. It's not too heavy. It's not too light. It's a good game. I enjoy it. So with that, you may need to go out and Mauer your Bauer, or go and build some walls and score some points. But I enjoy it. So with that, I will thank you for coming to Board Games with Scott and invite you to come back to another episode. You'll find them all over at boardgameswithscott.com. Thanks a lot, and bye-bye.